Okay guys, so this video is going to be about the endocrine system, and I'm going to talk about some of the major organs of the endocrine system that are covered in this chapter, and talk about some of the hormones that are produced by these organs. So in this figure that I have pulled up from your textbook, it kind of shows all of the major endocrine organs that are covered in chapter 9. And so I'm going to go through and label these, and then I'm going to scroll down and write out the name of each one of the organs and write out some of the major hormones that are produced by those organs. Alright, so let's start at the top here. Oh, and just to let you know, I'll probably break this video up into 2 parts just so it's not extremely long. So I'll probably do about half of the organs in this video, and then I'll do a second video with the rest. Okay, so let's start up at the top with this first endocrine organ, which is the pineal gland. Now the pineal gland produces one major hormone for us. So let me write that here. And that hormone is melatonin. Some of you might have heard of this one before, but melatonin is important in regulating our sleep-wake cycle. So it helps us sleep, helps us kind of keep a steady pace on waking up, sleeping, getting that cycle going. Alright, so the next gland that's shown here is the hypothalamus. Some of you guys might remember the hypothalamus from the nervous system chapter back in Principles 1 because it's part of the brain. But the hypothalamus is also an endocrine organ. Okay. Now the hypothalamus produces 2 hormones for us, and those 2 hormones are oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone, which I'm just going to abbreviate as ADH here. Okay. So oxytocin plays a really important role in the birthing process. Whenever a woman is giving birth, her uterus has to contract to push the baby out. And what stimulates those contractions is oxytocin, the hormone oxytocin, which gets produced by the hypothalamus. Oxytocin is also important in milk letdown, which means that after a woman has given birth and she's ready to breastfeed her child, in order to breastfeed, the letdown process has to happen, which means, basically the breast needs to be able to release the milk for the baby. And so that process is also stimulated by the hormone oxytocin. All right. The next hormone that's produced by the hypothalamus, again, is antidiuretic hormone. And this hormone, the major function of it is to promote retention of water by our kidneys. And what I mean by retention is basically allows us to hold water in our bodies to retain that water. Okay. Now this hormone is also called vasopressin sometimes. And the reason for that is, this hormone also causes constriction of blood vessels, which increases blood pressure within the body. Okay, so it increases pressure. But one interesting thing about ADH is, if you're not producing enough ADH, it's going to cause you to lose a lot of water, and so that can cause dehydration. One time, when people might have issues with this would be if you drink alcohol. Alcohol actually reduces the production of ADH in an individual for a short amount of time. And so that causes you to lose a lot of water, get dehydrated, which can lead to hangovers, giving you headaches, making you feel bad the next day. All right. So moving on to the next gland, underneath the hypothalamus, we have the pituitary gland. All right. So the pituitary gland. Now the pituitary gland is broken up into 2 regions. You have the posterior pituitary, or the posterior lobe, and then you have the anterior pituitary, or the anterior lobe. Now the posterior lobe is not technically an endocrine organ because it does not produce any hormones, but it does release these 2 hormones that we just talked about that are secreted or produced by the hypothalamus. Okay. So the hypothalamus produces oxytocin and vasopressin, and it releases those hormones to the posterior lobe, of the pituitary gland, which kind of stores them until they need to be released into the bloodstream. So the posterior lobe essentially just stores oxytocin and ADH and holds on to them until they need to be released. That's pretty much what it does. The anterior lobe, however, produces 6 different hormones for us. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first one, which is growth hormone. Now this one does exactly what it sounds like it does. It causes growth within the body. It stimulates growth within the body, more specifically within, especially skeletal muscles and the skeletal system, growth of those structures. So it allows for growth in height and growth in size overall within the person. Also, secondarily, it kind of plays a role in our metabolism as well, which just means plays a role in ATP production in the body, which in turn helps us grow and get bigger. All right, the second hormone produced by the anterior pituitary is prolactin. Now, this hormone is important in women who have given birth, and what it's important for is it helps stimulate milk production in those females, so it allows them to produce milk for their infant. Right? Next hormone is follicle stimulating hormone, also known as FSH, which is the abbreviation. Now, follicle stimulating hormone is produced in males and females. In females, this hormone helps to stimulate follicle development within the ovaries, which just means that it allows the eggs to mature in the ovaries and get ready for ovulation. Okay? In males, follicle stimulating hormone helps to stimulate sperm development within the testes of those males. Okay, so it helps with production of sperm or production of sex cells within the male. All right, so that goes for that one. The next one is luteinizing hormone, which is abbreviated LH. And luteinizing hormone, again, is produced in males and females. In females, luteinizing hormone triggers ovulation, so it causes ovulation to happen. And ovulation is just the release of an egg cell from the ovary, okay, a mature egg cell. And that allows for the possibility of fertilization, where the sperm cell, enters the egg cell and allows for the production of a zygote or fetus. In males, luteinizing hormone stimulates testosterone production. Okay, and we'll talk more about testosterone in a second, but that's another major hormone found within the males to help them, develop their secondary sexual characteristics. All right, so moving on from luteinizing hormone, the next one we have is thyroid stimulating hormone, which I'm going to abbreviate as TSH. Right? So thyroid stimulating hormone does exactly what it says. It stimulates the thyroid gland, okay, to tell it when it needs to release the hormones that it produces, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then the last one produced by the anterior pituitary is adrenocorticotropic hormone, which I'm going to abbreviate as ACTH. Okay, so adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH, is a hormone that gets released from the anterior pituitary, and it stimulates the adrenal gland, which is a gland that sits on top of the kidneys, to tell it to secrete glucocorticoids, which is a specific type of hormone produced by the cortex of the adrenal gland, okay, which is kind of the outer region of the adrenal gland. And I'll talk more about what glucocorticoids are used for in just a second. But just know ACTH stimulates the release of glucocorticoids from the adrenal gland. All right. All right. So moving on to the next gland, we have the thyroid gland. Right? Thyroid gland, which is the larger kind of butterfly-shaped gland right there in the throat. So let's move down here. Now, the thyroid gland produces 2 major kind of sets of hormones, if you will. The first one is thyroid hormone, which really has 2 minor hormones categorized underneath it. And those 2 are T3, also known as triiodothyronine, right? And T4, which is thyroxine. Both of these hormones together, just, we kind of group them together and call it thyroid hormone. But thyroid hormone is really the major metabolic hormone of the body. It's the major one that controls our metabolism, which is controlling essentially the production of energy, production of ATP within the human body, which is one of the main things keeping us alive. Okay, so it's a pretty important hormone. The second hormone that's produced by the thyroid gland is calcitonin. Now, calcitonin is important in regulating blood calcium levels. So you have calcium floating through your blood, most of the time, especially after you eat a calcium-rich diet. And if you have a lot of calcium floating through your bloodstream, more than you actually need within the body, you can store that excess calcium in your bones, which you probably remember from Principles 1. But there's a hormone that gets released by the thyroid gland called calcitonin that triggers the storage of that calcium, okay? And that's, again, that's calcitonin, okay? So that's going to allow us to store calcium in the bones and to reduce blood calcium levels overall, okay? So to reduce the amount of blood calcium within the body. All right, so that's the two hormones produced by the thyroid gland. So the next gland, really a set of 4 glands, are called the parathyroid glands. Okay, so parathyroid glands. And again, there are 4 of these, and they actually sit on the posterior surface of the thyroid gland. Okay, but the major hormone that is produced by the parathyroid glands is parathyroid hormone, right, which I'm just going to abbreviate as PTH. And parathyroid hormone is also very important in regulating blood calcium levels, okay? Now, this one does the opposite of calcitonin. So parathyroid hormone gets released whenever you have low blood calcium levels. So say you've gone a really long time without getting any calcium in your diet. Say you're, in starvation mode. You haven't had any calcium in your diet. This hormone will be getting released from the parathyroid glands, and it will actually cause your body to start to leach calcium out of your bones, remove it from your bones, so it can be put into your bloodstream and used elsewhere in the body, because calcium is needed throughout the body. Your muscular system needs it, nervous system needs it, your heart needs it to function properly, and so it has to be in your bloodstream pretty much at all times. So if you're not getting it in your diet, you got to get it from somewhere. You're going to be getting it from your bones, okay? And this parathyroid hormone allows you to remove that calcium from the bones and get it into your bloodstream. All right? So that's the major one produced by the parathyroid glands. All right, so I'm going to stop this video and then I'll pick back up on the next video.